The morning sun poured through the windows of Ashford Manor like honey, but Miss Clara Whitmore could not feel its warmth. Her fingers trembled as she held the cream envelope, its weight no more than a feather, yet heavy with the burden of 10 long years. The handwriting upon it was elegant, measured, and utterly familiar, though she had never seen it addressed to her before, not once in a decade. Captain Edmund Hartley had written to her at last. After 3,650 days of silence, after 120 letters sent without reply, after hope had withered like autumn leaves and scattered on the wind, he had written on the very eve of her wedding to another man. Clara's lady's maid, Betsy, hovered near the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Miss Clara, are you quite well? You've gone pale as milk." "I am," Clara began, then stopped, for she did not know how to finish such a lie. She was not well. She had not been well for 10 years, not since the day Edmund Hartley had ridden away from her father's estate without a word of promise or farewell. The wedding was tomorrow. Lord Ashford, kind and respectable, waited to claim her as his bride. The chapel had been dressed in white roses. The guests had travelled from across England. Her father had invested considerable sums in the wedding breakfast. Everything was arranged, proper and inevitable. And now this letter had come. Clara dismissed Betsy with a gentle wave, needing solitude for what she must do. With shaking hands, she broke the wax seal, dark blue and bearing the crest of the Hartley family, a hawk in flight. The paper unfolded like the pages of a book she had written in her heart, but never dared to read aloud. "Miss Whitmore," it began, so formal, so distant, as though they had not once walked together through summer meadows, as though she had not once believed herself the keeper of his heart. "I write to you with the full knowledge that I have no right to your attention, still less to your forgiveness. For 10 years I have carried your letters with me, every single one, across battlefields and deserts, through storms and silence. I read them in the darkness of lonely camps. I memorized them in the fever of wounds. They were my compass when I lost my way, my light when hope seemed extinguished. But I could not reply. I could not write to you, knowing I might never return. I could not promise what I had no power to fulfill. Tomorrow, I am told, you will wed Lord Ashford. I am told that your life has moved forward, as it should, as it must. I write now, not to disturb your peace, but to tell you what I should have said a decade ago. That your letters saved me. That every word you wrote was a lifeline when death came close. That I have loved you every day of these 10 years, and that I will love you still when you take another man's name. Forgive me, Clara. Forgive the coward who could not speak, and the fool who speaks too late. Yours, in every way that no longer matters. Edmund Hartley. The letter slipped from Clara's fingers and drifted to the floor like a fallen bird. For a long moment, she could not breathe. The room seemed to tilt around her, the furniture blurring through tears she had not known she was shedding. 10 years. 10 years of silence, explained in a single page. 10 years of unanswered questions, resolved in a few careful lines. 10 years of love, confessed on the day before it ceased to matter. Or did it cease to matter? That was the question that burned through Clara's chest like wildfire. Did love have an expiration, a date beyond which it could no longer change the course of a life? Was duty stronger than desire? Was obligation more sacred than the truth of one's heart? She did not know, but she knew this. Tomorrow she would stand in the chapel of Ashford Manor and speak vows that would bind her forever to a man she respected but did not love. And Edmund Hartley, the man whose letters she had written with hope and longing for 10 long years, would become a memory she could never revisit, unless she found the courage to do what every rule of society forbade, unless she dared to rewrite the ending of her own story. But we are ahead of ourselves. This tale does not begin with a letter received on the eve of a wedding. It begins much earlier, in a summer golden with promise, when two young people first discovered what it meant to see one's future in another's eyes. Let us return to the beginning, to the moment when Clara Whitmore first met Captain Edmund Hartley, and understand how love, once kindled, can burn for a decade without a single word to feed its flame. The summer of 1832 arrived at Willowmere with a warmth that seemed to promise magic. Clara Whitmore was 18 years old, fresh from her final year at Miss Pemberton's School for Young Ladies, and utterly unprepared for what awaited her at her father's estate. Her father, Sir William Whitmore, had invited a group of officers from the nearby garrison for a garden party, and among them was a young captain whose quiet intensity set him apart from his more boisterous companions. Captain Edmund Hartley was 24 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair and eyes the color of stormy seas. He did not laugh loudly at jests, nor did he boast of his accomplishments in the military. Instead, he stood slightly apart from the others, observing the gathering with the careful attention of a man who had learned to read situations before committing himself to them. Clara noticed him at once. There was something in his stillness that intrigued her, something in the way his gaze traveled over the assembled guests, without judgment, only interest. When their eyes met across the garden, she felt a jolt of recognition, as though they had known each other in some previous existence and were simply remembering now. "You are staring, Clara," her cousin Amelia whispered at her elbow. "It is most unseemly." "I was merely observing the guests," Clara protested, though her cheeks warmed with the lie. Amelia laughed. "You were observing one guest in particular. That is Captain Hartley. They say he is very brave in battle and very reserved in society. None of the local girls have been able to draw him into conversation. Perhaps he simply prefers silence to empty chatter," Clara suggested. "Or perhaps," Amelia said with a knowing smile, "he is waiting for someone worth speaking to." As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Hartley began walking toward them. Clara's heart quickened its pace. She smoothed her pale blue muslin gown and tried to compose her features into an expression of polite interest rather than the racing anticipation she felt. "Miss Whitmore," he said, bowing to her. His voice was deep and pleasant, with a hint of warmth beneath its formal tone. "Captain Hartley," she replied, curtsying. "I hope you are enjoying my father's hospitality." "Very much," he said, "though I confess I find the beauty of the gardens far more interesting than the refreshments." It was not a particularly clever line, but the way he said it, his eyes never leaving hers, made it feel like a confession. "You are fond of gardens, Captain?" Clara asked. "I am fond of places where things grow," he replied. "In my profession, one sees too much of destruction. It is a comfort to remember that beauty can still take root and flourish." There was something in his words that went beyond polite conversation. Clara sensed a deeper truth beneath them, a loneliness that matched her own. She had spent years in the company of young ladies who spoke of nothing but ribbons and balls and advantageous marriages. Here at last was someone who seemed to understand that the world held both darkness and light, and that acknowledging one did not diminish the other. They walked together through the rose arbor, their conversation flowing with surprising ease. He told her of his travels with the regiment, though he spoke little of battle itself. She told him of her studies, her love of poetry, her dreams of seeing more of the world than the boundaries of her father's estate. The hours slipped away like minutes. When the garden party ended and the officers departed, Clara felt as though something vital had been taken from her. A piece of herself she had not known was missing until Edmund Hartley appeared to fill its space. "You shall see him again," Amelia assured her as they watched the officers ride away. "Father has invited them to dine next week." But a week felt like an eternity to Clara. She returned to the house and sat at her writing desk, staring at the blank page before her. What did one say to a man one had met only hours before, but who already seemed essential? She could not write to him directly. That would be improper, forward, scandalous. Yet the need to reach across the distance between them, to keep the connection alive, was overwhelming. And so she made a decision that would shape the next 10 years of her life. She would write to him, not as a suitor might write to a lady, but as one soul might write to another. She would send her letters without expectation of reply, as gifts freely given, asking nothing in return. If he read them, that would be enough. If they brought him a moment of comfort or joy, that would be sufficient. She dipped her pen in ink and began. "Dear Captain Hartley," she wrote, "I hope this letter finds you well. I wish to thank you for your company this afternoon. Our conversation was a rare gift in a world that often favors noise over substance. I do not know if you share my belief that words written can sometimes convey what words spoken cannot, but I felt compelled to write to you, to tell you that I found in our meeting something I did not know I was searching for, a kindred spirit. If you have time in the midst of your duties, I would welcome your reply, but if you do not, please know that I shall think of you with warmth and wish you safety in all your endeavors. Yours in friendship, Clara Whitmore." She sealed the letter and sent it with a servant to the garrison. Then she waited. Days passed. A week. The dinner party came and went. Captain Hartley attended, and they spoke again, but he made no mention of her letter. Clara felt the sting of embarrassment. Perhaps he had thought her forward. Perhaps he had laughed at her presumption. Perhaps he had not read it at all. But still, she could not stop herself. A week after the dinner, she wrote again. This time, she told him of a book she had been reading, a volume of Wordsworth's poetry, and how certain lines had made her think of their conversation in the garden. She described the changing seasons at Willowmere, the way the leaves were beginning to turn gold, the way the light slanted differently through the windows. She wrote as though she were speaking to a friend, with honesty and without artifice. Again, there was no reply, and yet she could not bring herself to stop. The letters became a habit, a ritual. Once a week, she would sit at her desk and pour out her thoughts onto paper. She wrote of her daily life, her observations, her hopes and fears. She wrote of things she would never say aloud, for fear of being thought too serious, too thoughtful, too unlike the carefree young lady society expected her to be. And slowly, without realizing it, Clara fell deeply, irrevocably in love with Captain Edmund Hartley. Not because he replied to her letters, not because he courted her with flowers and pretty speeches, but because writing to him made her feel more truly herself than she had ever felt before. Because the act of sending her words into the unknown, trusting that they might matter to someone, gave her courage she had not known she possessed. Months passed. A year. Captain Hartley was deployed to India with his regiment. Clara heard the news from her father, and her heart seized with fear. India was so far away, a place of danger and disease. Men went there and did not return. Yet still, she wrote. She addressed her letters to the garrison, trusting that they would be forwarded to him wherever he was. She did not know if they reached him. She had no proof that he even knew of her continued correspondence, but she wrote anyway because stopping felt like a betrayal of something sacred, a promise she had made not to him, but to herself. 2 years became 3. 3 became 5. Clara's friends married and had children. Her father spoke occasionally of potential suitors, gentlemen who might make suitable husbands, but Clara put him off with vague excuses. How could she marry anyone when her heart belonged to a man who had never asked for it, who had never acknowledged it, who perhaps did not even know it existed. "You are wasting your youth on a dream," Amelia told her one afternoon, her tone gentle but concerned. "Captain Hartley has not written to you once in 5 years. Clara, he may be dead. For all we know, he is not dead," Clara said with a certainty she could not explain. "I would know if he were dead." "How?" Amelia demanded. "How would you know?" Clara touched the locket at her throat. A simple silver piece that held no portrait, only a tiny dried flower from the rose arbor where she and Edmund had first walked together. "I would feel it," she said simply. But doubt was a persistent companion. In her darker moments, Clara wondered if she had invented the connection between them, if she had built a castle of dreams upon the foundation of a single afternoon's conversation. Perhaps Edmund Hartley did not think of her at all. Perhaps he had long forgotten the earnest young woman who had once walked with him among the roses. Perhaps her letters were a source of amusement to him, or worse, an annoyance. Yet she could not stop. The letters had become as necessary to her as breathing. They were her way of holding on to hope, of believing that love, even unreturned, had value, that devotion, even unacknowledged, was not wasted. 7 years, 8, 9. Clara turned 28, an age at which society had all but given up on her marrying. She was labeled a spinster, a woman past her prime, too particular in her tastes, too peculiar in her habits. Her father grew concerned. "You cannot wait forever for a man who will not come," he told her. "I have arranged an introduction to Lord Ashford. He is a widower, in need of a wife to manage his household. He is kind and respectable. You could do far worse, Clara." Clara met Lord Ashford. He was indeed kind and respectable. He was 45 years old, with greying hair and a gentle manner. He had loved his first wife dearly and mourned her still, but his 3 children needed a mother and his estate needed a mistress. He did not offer Clara passion or romance. He offered her stability, security, and a role to fulfill. And Clara, after 10 years of waiting for a reply that never came, after 120 letters sent into the void, after a decade of hoping against hope, finally made a practical decision. She accepted Lord Ashford's proposal, not because she loved him, but because she could not spend the rest of her life waiting for a ghost. Because her father was aging and needed to see her settled. Because hope, when it goes unanswered for too long, becomes a burden too heavy to carry. The engagement was announced. The wedding was planned. Clara wrote one final letter to Captain Edmund Hartley, her 120th letter, and in it she told him that she was to be married. She did not write it with bitterness or accusation. She wrote it as a farewell, a closing of a chapter, a gentle letting go. "Dear Edmund," she wrote, using his given name for the first time in 10 years, "I am to be married in 1 month's time to Lord Ashford of Kent. He is a good man, and I believe I shall be content as his wife. I wanted you to know, though I do not know why it should matter to you, that I have treasured these years of writing to you, even without reply. You have been my companion in silence, my confessor without judgment, my hope when hope seemed foolish. I do not regret a single letter I have written, for they were written in truth, and truth is never wasted. I wish you every happiness, wherever you are, and I release you from any obligation you may have felt toward me. We are both free now. Yours always and never, Clara Whitmore." She sent the letter and felt a strange mix of grief and relief. The waiting was over. The question had been answered by her own hand. She would marry Lord Ashford, and she would make a life that was calm and dignified, if not passionate. She would forget Captain Edmund Hartley, or at least she would try. But fate, it seemed, had other plans, because on the morning before her wedding, One day before she would walk down the aisle and take Lord Ashford's name, a letter arrived. A letter with dark blue wax and a hawk in flight. A letter that changed everything. Clara stood in her bedchamber, the letter from Edmund Hartley trembling in her hands. Around her, the wedding preparations continued. Betsy was arranging her travelling costume for the journey to Lord Ashford's estate after the ceremony. Downstairs, her father was reviewing final details with the housekeeper. In the village chapel, white roses were being woven into garlands. The world moved forward toward tomorrow as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Edmund Hartley loved her. He had always loved her. He had read every letter. He had carried them with him across continents and battlefields. He had kept silent, not from indifference, but from a misguided nobility, a fear of making promises he might not live to keep. And now, on the eve of her wedding to another man, he had finally spoken. Clara sank onto the edge of her bed, her mind racing. What was she to do? To call off the wedding now, on the day before, would be scandalous beyond measure. It would humiliate Lord Ashford, who had done nothing to deserve such treatment. It would shame her father, who had spent considerable sums on the celebration. It would make her the subject of gossip for years to come. She would be labelled jilt, a woman without honor, a creature ruled by emotion rather than sense. And yet, could she truly stand in that chapel tomorrow and vow to love, honor, and obey a man she did not love, knowing that the man she had loved for 10 years had finally revealed his heart to her? Could she live the rest of her life as Lady Ashford, always wondering what might have been, always carrying the knowledge that she had chosen duty over truth? A knock at the door interrupted her turmoil. "Clara?" It was her father's voice. "May I enter?" She quickly folded Edmund's letter and tucked it into the pocket of her gown. "Of course, Papa." Sir William entered, his expression warm with paternal affection. He had been a good father to her, if somewhat distant, absorbed in his own pursuits, but always ensuring her comfort and education. "I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow," he said, settling into the chair by the window, "to tell you how proud I am of the woman you have become, and how much your mother would have delighted in seeing you wed." Clara's throat tightened at the mention of her mother, who had died when Clara was only 12. "Thank you, Papa." He studied her face with sudden concern. "You are pale, my dear. Are you quite well?" "I am," she began, then stopped, unable to complete the lie. Her father deserved better than falsehood, even kind falsehood. "Papa, may I ask you something?" "Of course." She took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "If you had loved Mama deeply, and something had prevented you from marrying her, would you have been able to marry another?" Sir William's expression grew thoughtful. "What brings such a question on the eve of your wedding, Clara?" She could not tell him about Edmund's letter. Not yet, perhaps not ever, but she could ask for his wisdom without revealing the source of her distress. "I simply wonder," she said softly, "if love, once given, can ever truly be recalled, or if it remains, always, no matter what choices we make afterward." Her father was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held a sadness she had never heard before. "Your mother was not the first woman I loved," he said quietly. "There was another. When I was very young, her name was Margaret, and she was the daughter of a merchant, quite unsuitable for the son of a baronet. My father forbid the match. I obeyed, as a dutiful son should. I married your mother instead, and in time I came to love her truly and deeply. But I never forgot Margaret. I heard, years later, that she had married a clerk and was very happy. I hope she was. I hope she did not waste her life pining for what could not be, as I sometimes fear I encouraged her to do." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Do you regret obeying your father?" Sir William met her gaze directly. "I regret that I did not have the courage to fight for what I wanted. I regret that I valued propriety over passion. But I do not regret your mother, or you, or the life we built together." Regret is complicated, Clara. It can hold both sorrow and gratitude in the same breath. He rose and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "If you are having doubts about Lord Ashford, you must tell me now. I would rather face scandal than see you unhappy." It was the opening she needed, the permission to speak her truth. And yet the words would not come, because speaking them would make them real. Speaking them would set events in motion that could not be undone. She began, her voice barely a whisper. Before she could continue, a commotion erupted downstairs. Raised voices, the sound of the front door opening, footsteps hurrying through the hall. Sir William frowned. What on earth? Betsy burst into the room without knocking, her eyes wide with shock. "Miss Clara, Sir William, there is a gentleman downstairs demanding to see Miss Clara. He says it is most urgent. He says he is Captain Edmund Hartley, just returned from India." The room seemed to tilt. Clara gripped the bedpost for support. Edmund was here. He had not simply written a letter and left her to make the impossible choice alone. He had come. He had ridden through the night, perhaps, to arrive on the day before her wedding. He had come to fight for what he wanted, in a way her father never had. Sir William's expression had gone from confused to stern. Captain Hartley, the officer from the garrison, all those years ago? What business could he possibly have here on the eve of your wedding? Clara's hand moved instinctively to the pocket where Edmund's letter rested. "Papa, I must speak with him." "Absolutely not," her father said firmly. "It would be most improper. You are to be married tomorrow, Clara. Whatever this man has to say, it is 10 years too late." "Is it?" Clara heard herself say, her voice stronger now, fueled by a decade of hope that refused to be extinguished. "Is love ever truly too late, Papa? Or does it simply wait until we are brave enough to claim it?" Sir William stared at her, understanding dawning on his face. "Clara, what have you done?" "Nothing dishonorable," she said quickly. "I have written letters, that is all. For 10 years, I have written to Captain Hartley, and he has never replied, until today, until the day before I am to marry another man. And now he is here, and I must know why. I must hear what he has to say." Her father's expression was torn between concern and reluctant admiration. "If you see him, there will be talk. If Lord Ashford learns of it, he may call off the wedding himself." "Then so be it," Clara said, and was surprised by her own calm. "If I am to marry Lord Ashford, I must do so with a clear conscience, knowing I have heard all that needed to be said. If I do not see Captain Hartley now, I will wonder for the rest of my life what he came to tell me." Sir William studied his daughter for a long moment. Then, with a sigh of resignation, he nodded. "Very well. But I shall be present for this conversation. I will not have your reputation compromised, Clara, no matter what comes of this." "Thank you, Papa," Clara whispered. They descended the stairs together. In the drawing room, pacing like a caged animal, was Captain Edmund Hartley. He looked older than Clara remembered, weathered by sun and hardship, his face leaner, his frame still strong but marked by visible scars. He wore his uniform dusty from travel, and his eyes held a desperate intensity that took her breath away. When he saw her enter, he froze. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. A decade of silence and longing stretched between them, like a bridge neither had dared to cross until now. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Captain Hartley," she replied, her own voice trembling. "You received my letter," he said, not a question, but a statement. "I did." "This morning." He took a step toward her, then seemed to remember himself and stopped. His gaze flicked to Sir William, standing stern and watchful by the door. "Sir William, I apologize for the intrusion. I know my timing is unforgivable, but I had to come. I had to speak to her before it was too late." "It is already too late," Sir William said coldly. "My daughter is to be married tomorrow to Lord Ashford. Whatever you have to say should have been said years ago." "You are right," Edmund said, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "I should have written to her the moment I received her first letter. I should have told her then what she meant to me. But I was a coward. I was afraid of making promises I might not be able to keep. I was afraid of tying her to a man who might die in some distant land, leaving her a widow before she was ever truly a wife. So I kept silent, and I told myself it was for her good. But it was not for her good. It was for my own cowardice." Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She had waited so long to hear these words. So long. "You read my letters," she whispered. "Every one," he said fiercely. "Every single one. 120 letters, Clara. I carried them with me everywhere. When I was wounded at Bangalore, the surgeon found them tucked inside my jacket, stained with my blood, but still legible. He asked me who had written them. This woman who poured her soul onto paper for a man who never replied. I told him you were an angel I did not deserve. He told me I was a fool who did not deserve you. He was right." Sir William's expression had softened slightly, though his posture remained rigid. "If you valued my daughter so highly, Captain, why did you wait until the eve of her wedding to appear?" Edmund's hands clenched at his sides. "Because I did not know she was to be married until 3 days ago. I have been travelling for months to return to England. My regiment was stationed in Calcutta, and when my service ended, I booked passage on the first ship home. I arrived in London only to learn that Miss Whitmore was engaged to Lord Ashford, and the wedding was to take place today. Wait, tomorrow. I rode through the night to get here in time." He turned his full attention back to Clara, and in his eyes she saw everything she had hoped for and feared in equal measure. "Clara, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I have forfeited any claim through my silence, but I cannot let you marry another man without telling you the truth. I love you. I have loved you since the day we walked together in your father's garden. I have loved you through every letter you sent, through every word that gave me hope when I had none, through every moment that I thought I might not survive to see England again. And if you tell me now that it is too late, that your heart belongs to Lord Ashford, I will accept it and trouble you no more. But if there is any part of you that still feels for me what I feel for you, then I am asking, no, I am begging you to give me a chance to prove that my love is worth the scandal, worth the gossip, worth the disappointment of all those who expect you to do your duty tomorrow." The silence that followed was absolute. Clara was aware of her father's sharp gaze, of Betsy hovering anxiously in the doorway, of the clock ticking on the mantel, marking the seconds of a decision that would determine the rest of her life. She thought of Lord Ashford, kind and patient, waiting for her to become his wife and the mother to his children. She thought of the guests who would arrive tomorrow, the chapel decorated with white roses, the scandal that would erupt if she changed her course now. She thought of duty and obligation and all the careful plans that had been laid. And then she thought of 10 years spent writing letters to a man who had never replied, and how she had done it anyway, because love, real love, did not calculate its worth by the response it received. She thought of her father's regret, his admission that he wished he had fought for Margaret instead of choosing propriety. She thought of growing old as Lady Ashford, always wondering what might have been if she had only been brave enough to reach for what her heart wanted. She took a step forward, then another. Edmund watched her approach, hope and fear warring in his expression. When she stood directly before him, so close she could see the silver threads in his dark hair and the lines that hardship had carved around his eyes, she reached into her pocket and withdrew his letter. "You wrote," she said softly, "that you loved me in every way that no longer mattered." She held the letter between them, her hand steady now, her voice clear. "You were wrong, Edmund. It matters. It has always mattered. And it matters now more than anything else in the world." She turned to her father, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "Papa, I cannot marry Lord Ashford. I am sorry for the scandal this will cause. I am sorry for the inconvenience and the expense. But I cannot stand in that chapel tomorrow and make vows I do not mean to a man I do not love, not when the man I have loved for 10 years is standing here asking me to choose truth over convenience." Sir William's expression was inscrutable. For a long, terrible moment, Clara thought he would forbid it, would insist she go through with the wedding regardless. Then, slowly, a small smile touched his lips. "Your mother," he said quietly, "would have told me you get your stubbornness from my side of the family." He looked at Edmund, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You understand, Captain, that if you hurt my daughter, there is nowhere on this earth you can hide from me." "I understand, sir," Edmund said firmly. "And I swear to you on my honor as an officer and a gentleman that I will spend every day of my life ensuring she never regrets this choice." Sir William nodded slowly. "Then you had best go see Lord Ashford immediately and explain the situation. He deserves to hear it from you, and to hear it before the gossips do." Clara felt a wave of gratitude and relief so powerful it made her dizzy. "Papa," he came to her and kissed her forehead gently. "I want you to be happy, Clara. I want you to have what I did not have the courage to fight for. Go. Both of you, go and do what must be done. I shall handle the guests and the explanations here." Edmund extended his hand to Clara, and she took it without hesitation. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and she felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was what she had been waiting for. Not just his love, but the courage to claim her own happiness, to risk everything for the truth of her heart. They rode together to Lord Ashford's estate, a journey of 2 hours that felt both endless and too brief. Edmund told her of his years in India, of the letters he had read by campfire light, of the hope they had given him when death came close. Clara told him of the strange comfort she had found in writing to him, of how the act of pouring her thoughts onto paper had kept her sane and whole even in the absence of reply. "I thought I had imagined the connection between us," Edmund admitted as they rode through the countryside. "I thought perhaps I had built it up in my mind, turned one afternoon in a garden into something more than it was. But when I read your letters, I knew that what I felt was real because you felt it too. You just had the courage to speak it, and I did not." "It was not courage," Clara said. "It was need. I needed to reach you, even if you never reached back." They arrived at Lord Ashford's manor as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Clara had sent a note ahead asking for a private audience, and Lord Ashford received them in his study, his expression puzzled but courteous. "Miss Whitmore," he said, rising from his desk, "this is unexpected. And Captain Hartley, I believe? We met briefly, years ago." "Lord Ashford," Clara began, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "I have come to tell you something that will cause you pain, and for that I am deeply sorry." She saw understanding dawn in his eyes, even before she spoke the words. He was not a foolish man, and the presence of Captain Hartley at her side told its own story. "You wish to call off the wedding," he said quietly. "I do," Clara confirmed. Not because of any fault in you, my lord. You have been nothing but kind and honorable. But I cannot marry you when my heart belongs to another. It would be unfair to you, and to your children who deserve a mother who comes to them with her whole heart, not just the parts of it that remain after she has given the rest away. Lord Ashford was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "I suspected," he said, "that your acceptance of my proposal came from practicality rather than affection. I had hoped that affection might grow in time, as it often does in marriages of convenience. But I am not so cruel as to hold a woman to a promise when her heart is elsewhere." He turned his gaze to Edmund. "Captain Hartley, I trust you understand the gift you have been given." "I do, my lord," Edmund said quietly, "and I will honor it for the rest of my life." Lord Ashford inclined his head. "Then I wish you both well. Miss Whitmore, I release you from our engagement without bitterness. I hope you will find the happiness you seek." Clara felt tears of gratitude slip down her cheeks. "You are a good man, Lord Ashford. I am sorry I could not be the wife you deserved." "You are exactly the woman you need to be," he replied gently. "And I dare say Captain Hartley here needs you far more than I do. Go. Be happy. That is enough." They departed as twilight deepened into evening. As they rode back toward Willowmere, Clara felt as though a weight she had carried for 10 years had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "What will we do now?" she asked Edmund, as they rode side by side through the gathering darkness. "I have no home to offer you, not yet," he admitted. "But I have my pension from the military, and I have prospects of employment. We will not live in luxury, Clara. Not at first. Perhaps not ever." "I do not need luxury," Clara said softly. "I need only you, and the truth between us, and the knowledge that I chose love over duty. That is enough." They reached Willowmere as the first stars appeared in the sky. Sir William was waiting for them in the drawing-room, and to Clara's surprise, he was smiling. "Well," he said, "I have sent messages to the guests, explaining that the wedding has been called off due to unforeseen circumstances. There will be gossip, of course. There will be scandal, but I have also made it clear that any who speak ill of my daughter will find themselves unwelcome in this house forevermore." He turned to Edmund. "Captain Hartley, I am not a romantic man, but I am not a fool either. I can see that you and Clara share something rare. I give you my blessing, with one condition." "Anything, sir?" Edmund said. "That you marry her properly, with all the ceremony she deserves. Once the scandal has died down. She may not have Lord Ashford's fortune or title, but she will have a wedding that honors the love you share." "Agreed?" "Agreed," Edmund said, his voice thick with emotion. Sir William nodded. "Then I believe congratulations are in order, though I suggest you both prepare yourselves for a very uncomfortable few weeks while society digests this turn of events." The weeks that followed were indeed uncomfortable. The tongue feasted upon the scandal of Miss Clara Whitmore, the bride who had jilted a respected lord on the eve of her wedding for a penniless captain. The gossips embroidered the tale with lurid details, none of them true, all of them intended to cast Clara as a fallen woman, and Edmund as a villain who had stolen her away. But Clara found, to her surprise, that she did not care. The opinions of people who had never bothered to know her, who had never asked what she wanted or hoped for, held no power over her anymore. She had spent 10 years being dutiful, being proper, being everything that society expected. And in the end, it had not made her happy. What made her happy was sitting in the garden with Edmund, their hands intertwined, talking of everything and nothing as the summer turned to autumn. What made her happy was writing letters to him when he travelled to London to seek employment, and receiving letters in return, finally beautifully in return. What made her happy was the knowledge that she had chosen truth over convenience, and that in doing so she had honored not just her love for Edmund, but her love for herself. 3 months after the wedding that never was, Captain Edmund Hartley and Miss Clara Whitmore were married in a small ceremony in the chapel at Willowmere. There were no white roses, no elaborate decorations, no crowd of guests, only Sir William, cousin Amelia, and a handful of close friends who had stood by Clara through the scandal. But when Edmund took Clara's hand in his and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure, and when Clara looked into his eyes and promised to love and honor him, she meant every word with her whole heart. They left Willowmere that evening, bound for a modest cottage in Derbyshire, where Edmund had secured a position managing an estate for a retired colonel. It was not grand, it was not fashionable, but it was theirs, and it was enough. As their carriage rolled through the countryside, Clara rested her head on Edmund's shoulder, feeling more at peace than she had in 10 long years. "Do you regret it?" Edmund asked softly. "The scandal, the loss of position, the comfortable life you might have had as Lady Ashford?" Clara lifted her head to look at him, and in the dim light of the carriage lamp she saw the love and concern in his eyes, the fear that he had cost her too much. "I regret nothing," she said firmly. "I regret not a single letter I wrote to you. Not a single day I waited, not a single moment of uncertainty or hope or longing, because all of it led me here to you, to this life we will build together, and that is worth everything I gave up and more." Edmund drew her close, his lips brushing her forehead in a gesture of tenderness that spoke more than words could. "I will spend my life being worthy of you," he whispered. "That is my vow, Clara. Not just the words I spoke in the chapel, but the promise I make to you now. You waited 10 years for me to speak. I will not waste a single day of the time we have been given." And he kept that promise. Through the years that followed, through hardship and joy, through the births of their children and the building of their modest but loving home, Edmund Hartley proved every day that love, when it is real and true, does not measure its worth by the world's standards. It measures its worth by the courage it takes to claim it and the grace it takes to honor it. As for the turn, they eventually found new scandals to dissect, new dramas to feast upon. The story of Miss Clara Whitmore and Captain Edmund Hartley faded into the background, remembered only as a curious footnote in the season's gossip. But for those who had witnessed it, who had seen the quiet bravery of a woman who chose love over duty, it remained a reminder that the heart, when given the freedom to speak, knows its own truth better than any rule of society ever could. And on quiet evenings, when the work of the day was done and the children were asleep, Clara would sit at her writing desk and add to the collection of letters she still wrote to Edmund, not because he was far away anymore, but because the act of writing to him had become a sacred ritual, a way of honoring the love that had grown from ink and paper into something real and enduring. Sometimes Edmund would read them aloud to her, even though she had written them, and they would laugh together at the memory of those 10 years of silence, marveling at how something so painful had become the foundation of something so beautiful. For 10 years, Clara Whitmore wrote letters to a man who did not reply, and when he finally did, on the day before her wedding to another, she made the bravest choice of her life. She chose to listen to her heart, to risk everything for the truth of her love, to believe that some things are worth waiting for, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And in the end, that courage gave her not just a love story, but a life, a whole, true, fully lived life, built on the foundation of 120 letters and the single reply that changed everything. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of love, courage, and second chances. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in Clara's place. Would you have married Lord Ashford out of duty, or would you have chosen love, even with all its risks and uncertainties? Your words inspire us to keep creating stories that awaken the heart and remind us all that true love is always worth fighting for. Stay until the end for another unforgettable story that will leave you breathless.